In an industry increasingly focused on sales and attracting wider demographics with every new release, it's only natural to provide more instances of hand-holding, checkpoints, and death mechanics that essentially mean nothing more than losing your rings in Sonic, a temporarily annoying setback that doesn't really impede your momentum. It's all well and good when done fairly, but the fact is one of the many things that makes gaming the passionate medium that it is today comes from the idea of testing your mettle against any number of infuriating creatures, levels, or bosses. Therein lies the rub, as sometimes these instances can totally make a game worth recommending, provoking many discussions around the idea of what it was like surviving something like Dark Souls' Ornstein and Smoke boss fight or Super Meat Boy's Dark Levels. The flip side being those other times when you know with every fibre of your being that you're never ever voluntarily doing a certain section of a game ever again. These are the levels that kill their game's replayability, the ones that come back into view whenever you're thinking about giving something another shot, and although there are certain candidates that pop up time and again, your water temples, your Battletoads speeder bikes, or the introductory license test from Driver, this time it's worth presenting a selection of controller snappers that are yet to get so torn apart on such a massive scale. Well, it's about time they were. I'm Scott from OurCulture.com, and these are 8 infuriating video game levels you forgot you hated. Number 8, Blood Trails in Max Payne. 2 incredible installments and one weirder one thanks to Rockstar taking over the reins, Max Payne's first game was an explosive debut on new hardware, showing off things like Matrix-inspired bullet time, as Remedy wrote a fantastically quotable story that ticked every box imaginable for a grizzled film noir cop getting his revenge. Something that completely derailed the experience, however, were the levels set inside Max's mind, seeing him haunted by the death of his child. Although the way this played out in-game was to have you literally running in the pitch black as you followed a tiny blood trail across the floor. Stepping just one way or the other meant instant death and a quick restart, and these levels went on and on and on, all the while Max's screaming baby gnawed away at your sanity levels. Maybe the point was to reduce you to some flickering edge of reality mess like Max, but it's more likely that this was just a bad idea executed on even worse. Number 7, the first race in Jak 3. Easily one of the greatest video game trilogies of all time, it doesn't get away from the fact that Jak 3 had some levels that were real stinkers, especially coming from the exemplary Jak 2 Renegade. Chances are you'd heard quite a bit about how the racing in Jak 3 was going to be this revolutionary new way to get around. Even the hulking great cars themselves looked extremely inviting. Except when it came time for Jak to prove himself and actually win the first race of the game, some floaty, sporadic physics and a tendency to spin you out at the last minute made for one whopper of a momentum killer. This first race then leads to a tiresome collection quest that sees you attempting to dart across the sand dunes as once again the physics model batters you more than the in-game weather effects. When you throw in enemy raiders that sideswipe you at every opportunity, it means you're just as likely to let time expire whilst marooned on a particularly angular pebble than finish in time. In short, it wasn't the best way to start the otherwise fantastic final chapter, and there's a very good reason hardly anybody was appropriately psyched for Jak X Combat Racing. Number 6, The Driver, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. When you look back over Rockstar's work on Grand Theft Auto over the years, it's increasingly evident just how incredible their programming team became, stretching the same game engine that produced GTA 3's Liberty City all the way to Miami and especially San Andreas. However, in doing so, they repeatedly asked many things of a physics engine and control scheme that just wasn't, well, doable. Because honestly, how many of you actually go back and replay the main campaign missions for any GTA? Chances are it's precisely because they're so haphazard in their difficulty and feel that once they're completed, well, that's it for life. So flashback to 2002 and Vice City's neon-drenched landscape drew everyone in pretty damn well, only for this horrifically programmed mission, The Driver, to make you long for a nearby punching bag. See, you were racing against this guy called Hillary, whose car was literally programmed to be bolted to the road, making your vehicle spin out horribly if you ever got next to him. Even if you did manage to get in front and were slowing down on a corner, for example, he'd literally just barrel on through like you weren't even there, sending you careening off into a nearby shop window and forcing a restart no matter how close to the end you might have been. It was agony. Number 5, Rainbow Road in Mario Kart. Forever the bane of any Mario Kart player's existence and the reason for plenty of frosty conversation following the stealing of a victory in a local multiplayer match, Rainbow Road and its annoyingly curvy tracks are supposed to be challenging, yet end up flinging you off the edge for all sorts of reasons instead. Trying to navigate your way around a level that looks like the snapshot of a piece of candy lost in some garbage is one thing, but when you can barely see where you're going, it's another entirely. Then factor in all the cart-toppling power-ups that come with any Mario Kart race, and you've got a recipe for pure white-knuckle rage. There's a good reason everyone always groans when this pops up in any random track selector, and when Mario Kart 9 releases in whatever future year it lands, Nintendo really need to give this one the boot once and for all. Number 4, Climbing the Spiked Column in God of War. At one time, the new mascot for Sony hardware, now a parody of himself who surely has a hidden bum tattoo that reads square square triangle, Kratos' adventures were one that danced a fine line between enjoyable spectacle and worthwhile difficulty. For the most part, the levels unraveled pretty well with a raucous pace that kept things interesting, but one not-so-fun roadblock where you had to attempt to climb out of hell itself by way of navigating up some spinning spiked columns, the touching of which would send you back to the bottom immediately, was a marked negative. Not only was the camera way too close to see what was above you, but once you got past one section, the pillars would reverse, changing the direction and hampering your momentum straight away. You have to imagine with creative overseer David Jaffe's previous work on Twisted Metal, maybe he just wanted to create something that would annoy gamers and go down in history as one of those levels. But man, did it have to be so downright unforgiving? Number 3, any real-time strategy level in Brutal Legend. Never has there been a game with such a perfect idea shown in a string of pre-release trailers that then got completely missed out on capitalizing on once it came to release. If you've got Jack Black, the license to use any heavy metal song from across the 80s and 90s, Ozzy Osbourne, Rob Halford and Lemmy as characters who pop up regularly, how in the blue hell do you then move away from the hack and slash approach that fans couldn't shut up about into some real-time strategy played out on the field with a variety of button shortcuts? That's sadly the route that Brutal Legend took, and in doing so royally peed away any semblance of fun alongside, as suddenly you just couldn't enjoy the combat, visual aesthetic or the music. Instead, you were too busy running to and fro like a headless chicken, guarding embattlements from always impending destruction, forever fighting off waves of troops by yourself that you'd otherwise be managing with a variety of stat boosts and cooldown meters. Brutal Legend remains an immortally cool idea on paper, but its execution was one of the most deflating and unnecessarily difficult experiences going, especially past the halfway mark when the focus became almost entirely on the areas of the game that felt the least satisfying. Number 2, Tilling the Resistance in Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. Now, Hideo Kojima's increasingly ridiculous baby reached a zenith of cutscene gameplay ratio back in 2008, but one time you were allowed to take control of Snake just made for an experience that didn't fit with the feel of the game overall. Tailing missions are just something that is never done well, as Assassin's Creed has more than proven over its many installments. And as for Metal Gear Solid 4's third act, you were asked to keep tabs on a moving resistance agent in amongst a sepia-toned city full of guards and enemy forces. Naturally, what makes it annoying is the same thing that ruins every single one of these types of missions. You're constantly stop-starting momentum to take cover, waiting for enemy AI to decide when they want to move forward again, all the while trying to take care of enemies that might impede your target's progress. With naff checkpointing and straight-up bad gameplay, coming from 2 open-ended levels that set a superb precedent in a series with a very solid track record, this is easily one of the worst levels in the entire franchise. Number 1, Supply Lines, Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. Do you think this was supposed to be fun? Seriously, the creators of Grand Theft Auto sat down when iterating on both GTA 3 and Vice City, brainstorming any number of revolutionary ideas, and they decided to keep this in? Asking you to get behind the controls of a tiny machine gun-equipped toy plane, Supply Line sees you swooping in and gliding around the city to destroy 4 enemy vehicles, all whilst they return fire and the plane itself controls about as well as a pile of ham. Not only that, but you're on a timer with limited fuel, so say you get through the whole thing, chances are you'll botch nailing the last act of landing where you started, killing yourself and starting all over again. The end result was scores of players either blowing up their plane when they didn't mean to, fumbling lining up the different weapons, or just simply running out of gas. Every way you look at it, this was incredibly out of place, and regardless, San Andreas already had that feeling of being the craziest entry in the series. There's no way to look at it as anything other than everything wrong with GTA's earlier, more experimental missions. And that's our list, so let me know in the comments which other sickeningly infuriated levels come screaming back into view once you start reminiscing on all that time spent, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I've been Scott from oculture.com, and I'll see you soon.
This is the end card, end slate. There's some videos to click here, channels there, some really smart people down below, smart cookies. They can edit videos and write articles on whatculture.com. You should subscribe and everything. And Phil, you've done a good job at this. It's not easily done, but you've fit everything in.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
Filled it in.